Hi, Sarah. It's Professor Melanie giving you feedback on your meaningful use assignment. Again, I like to do some video feedback so I can kind of go through your paper and give you pointers and go over points that I thought were awesome. So I'm just going to jump right in and give you some feedback on this, and then you'll see your rubric in the grading assignment. So always on the first page where you have your running head, the words running head should be on there, and then this should be 50 characters or less. And then you should have page numbers on all of the pages, starting with page 1 at the top in the upper right. So just be mindful of that. You did talk a lot about the High Tech Act. You have, the right components in your title page, so that's good. And then again, your running head would be 50 characters or less, and then it would have your title, your second page over here. And so if you're just doing introduction, you wouldn't need to put a title here, but you can put background information for this paper because that was one of the main components. And then you did give great information on high tech and era. And then I'll bring up some of this health information technology citation in a little bit here. So, but I appreciate the fact that you talked so much about the High Tech Act and ERA, and then you talked about how they were using, this to kind of financially incentivize people to use the electronic health records, right? Before that, we didn't have anybody really jumping on board to say, this is a great thing, I want to do this willingly. So it was, of course, used to incentivize people to use healthcare records, electronic healthcare records. And that's where meaningful use comes into play. So in your paper, you talked a lot about the High Tech Act and the 5 pillars, and you also talked about HIPAA. And the only thing that I would do is add meaningful use a little bit more throughout, and then maybe in your concluding paragraph, which I would add just a little bit more of a concluding paragraph about why meaningful use was so important and how all of these things tied into healthcare. So again, you had great reference here with Bird, and then you talked about financial gain, exactly why a lot of people chose to do that because they didn't want to lose out on finances. And then the 5 pillars, you gave a good summary of the 5 pillars and talked about, again, like tied it into what's happening. People may not go to the doctor, that type of thing. And then you did have a great summary of HIPAA and what HIPAA was intended to do. And then this is where I would just add maybe, a paragraph at the end saying meaningful use is, came out of the High Tech Act and it's tied to these 5 pillars of healthcare and HIPAA. And this is why it's so important to us. Even though it was used to be a financial incentive, this is why it was so important to us overall in healthcare and to our patients, right? Because they're the ones who are benefiting from having electronic health records that kind of cross over so that we can use technology to give them safer care and more cohesive care as long as they're, of course, within the same network. It's always a better way to get more cohesive care with transparent records. So that's just some ways to kind of tie that up together and finish off this paper with a conclusion and tie it, like weave it in a little throughout. And then your references. On your reference page, you want to make sure that you're putting the references that you actually used in your paper. So I didn't see that you had used the American Speech Language Hearing Association at all. So just something to think about when you go through. Maybe you did, but you didn't cite it, or maybe I missed it just as I read through. And then since normally we would have lowercase letters in our title, but since this is actually a proper noun, you would want this one to actually be all capitalized because it's a proper noun, the name of an act. So normally you wouldn't have to have that for everything, but for this one you would. And then, again, just being mindful of, if you're using this, make sure that you leave it in the references. If it's something that you didn't cite and use as part of your references, then you don't have to include that. It's a little bit different than like a works cited or a bibliography when we use APA formatting. And then since this is the name of an act, you would just want to make sure that this High Tech Act is capitalized. And then your title would be not italicized. what your journal would be. So if it's Journal of Ethics, I don't think you need to have the American Medical Association on there if it's just called the Journal of Ethics. And then, so I jumped into that reference just to show you it would actually be the AMA Journal of Ethics, as you can see in this upper right corner here. And then there's a little box here that says citation. So sometimes if you are trying to figure out how to cite something, if you click on that citation, they might give you some of the information that you would need. They don't always give it in APA format, so you have to be mindful of that, but they did give you a DOI here. So you could use this DOI as your DOI. So I just wanted to give you that information so you would have that. And then it looks like, I don't know why this is called the virtual mentor, but 2011, it gives you the volume, the issue, and the page numbers. So if you're ever trying to figure out where you can get information from, like on citations, sometimes they have them and you can pull out some of the details you need, but this is definitely not an APA format, so you wouldn't want to copy that one. And then as we get down here, you always want to make sure that this is spelled out, whatever this would be. And then you want to make sure that it would be double spaced. And what if you're having trouble with that, because it's something you copied and pasted, you can simply go to this little spot here and you can click on line spacing options and make it back to double spaced. And then it'll get you right back into how this needs to be. The author of this 10 patient safety tips would be the AHRQ, because that's where it's coming from. So the author would go first, then the date, and then this here. So just some things to think about for that. And then again, being mindful, if you didn't use this reference, then you want to make sure that you remove it. But if you did use it, then I might have missed it, but make sure that you have that documented. So again, I like to just give feedback so that if you have questions on APA, you can always ask. If you have questions on anything else merging into the paper, please always ask. I'm just here to help everybody learn and do better. But overall, I really enjoyed, you had great organization with your High-Tech Act flowing into your 5 pillars and then into HIPAA. It's just adding a little bit more of that meaningful use, and then a meaningful use section in your, for concluding why all of this ties into meaningful use. So great work. I appreciate that you turned your assignment in, and thank you for your work.